Hi, my name is Katie Weatherup, and I'm a shamanic practitioner, and I want to share some about my personal journey around romantic relationships and soulmates who aren't life partners and that sort of thing, because I'm in it, and I've been in it a number of times along my journey. And one of the things that I see in a lot of the clients I work with, particularly women, just because my practice seems to be disproportionately women who are coming to me for healing. I love working with men, but I seem to attract more women, is that really difficult place where you have an amazing connection with someone. It lights up in the psychic level. You know, you can feel when you're thinking about each other, and there's this past life recall, and there's this magic of just knowing how to touch, and there are inside jokes that only the other person gets. And there's a flavor of this, you know, that is the, romantic falling in love, intoxication thing. And there's a lot on, wow, your brain lights up like you were on drugs when you're in that first intoxicated love place. But beyond that, what I see is a lot of people who have a very authentic, very deep, very profound soul connection with somebody that they've been in romantic relationship or flirted with the idea of being in romantic relationship, and who they love very much, but who's ill-suited to be a good life partner. And the suffering of that, I had sort of a reprise of that. I spent a lot of time earlier on my journey in relationships where I spent a huge amount of time being incredibly conflicted. Do I stay with this? Do I let it go? I really care about this person, and I'm really not getting needs met. It's really frustrating. Is it me? Is it them? Is this something that I could change something about myself and work with? And there's just this knotted up, horrible feeling where no direction feels right. And I want to kind of pull that apart and lay out some maps that I've found really useful in being in a place in my dating journey where I don't spend a huge amount of time stuck in those really painful, messy places of do I stay, do I go? And what's hard about this is a lot of times now in my life my answer is, okay, I need to step away. But I've come there through the journey of getting a bunch of stuff triggered and really working with it. And I believe, in admittedly my biased opinion, that there are far more, mortal men who could succeed in relationship with me. Like the percentage of what I really need to feel safe and secure and loved, and what men who care about women are reasonably willing to show up for, my odds are a lot better, because who I was in my 20s, there was so much wounding and so much of my own issues that I was tripping over that I really needed to do some healing around. I don't think that there was an opportunity to really be settled in relationship where I was then, regardless of who the partner was. I think that I would have picked anything apart, because I had some really, really deep wounds, and I really needed to do the work to address them. And what's complicated about this is that there's so many factors and nuances, and so I wanted to just spend some time speaking into some of them, because there are a lot of things where I can offer like a really practical, follow these steps and you'll get these results. Okay, you have this big emotion that needs clearing, do some consistent fire ceremony with it, it'll get smaller. The voice in your head that says you're too fat or too stupid or too lazy or too whatever. Read Debbie Ford's book, The Dark Side of Light Chasers, so you learn about shadow work, so you're not telling yourself it's a good idea to have this voice in your head, and put it into the fire and fire ceremony, and that'll move some energy. And hey, let's do some shamanic healings so I can clean out some things that may be impacting how deeply this went in. Maybe it's your mother's voice, I can extract that. Maybe there was a past life wound, maybe your instincts are just really loud. There are a lot of mechanisms, and there's a straightforwardness to that kind of problem. wow, you're not sleeping well. Here, let's ward your house. Let's get you on, the right protocols. The guide said do this and this and this, and in some cases it's more complicated, but for a lot of those kind of problems, they can be really, really well resolved. But the question of relationships, do I stay, do I go, is this a good person for me, is it not working? Those are a lot harder and more nuanced and more multi-layered. So a couple of things that I want to share as a way to sort of understand all the messages that happen inside of us. So one of the most difficult places to be, I think, is when two parts of ourselves, or more than two parts of ourselves, are adamantly committed to different paths. And so that place, one of the techniques for kind of working with this that I really like is Melissa Siemens, I don't remember quite what she called it, but it was like her aligned yes. And she basically said, check in with each of your chakras about a big question and make sure that you can get consensus. And consensus doesn't mean every single chakra is like, yippee, woohoo, this is the best idea ever, yay, I love it, let's go forth. It is glorious when we find ourselves in a place where all of us is in alignment. Like you could check in with every chakra and it would be like, yes, this is the right thing. Those are amazing, clear, never questioning yourself kind of decisions. And in relationship, one of the pieces of wisdom that I really like from Sean Roop is, he said to me at one point, if you have alignment of 3 chakras in a romantic relationship, that is the path of suffering, because there's this really great connection, but more doesn't match than does. Now, if you have 4 chakras that get along really well, you're in a good place to have something that is explored. And what I like about this, so to circle around to the consensus thing, to me consensus just means everybody can live with it. Like nobody's like a hell no. It's going to be complicated anytime you try to embark on a path where some part of you is a hell no and some part of you is a hell yes. And there are times when it makes sense to move through that, but I would argue that it's very expensive. So there are times when the right choice for my business is to, sit my butt down and do the newsletter. But I haven't had as much success with that as when I'm in the flow. A better example, I'm going up to visit my folks tomorrow, and today I need to pack, and whether I'm in the mood to pack or not in the mood to pack, that is something that, needs to happen before I leave the house tomorrow. And so it's, even if there's a part of me that's really resistant, if I'm going to go on this trip, that's something that I need to make happen. But if I'm fighting myself and I'm arguing and I'm tantrumy about packing, it's just going to cost me a lot more. And so a lot of the choices and ways I design my life have to do with, like, can I get at least no part of me strenuously, passionately objecting to something that I want to do. And if every part of me is kind of cool with it and some parts of me are really excited about it, it is a great, great path to go forward with it. It really works. Just even making this video, I ran it through like, okay, I'll still have time to pack and I can meet my commitments. So, the parts of me that are like, be responsible adult girl, weren't particularly objecting. And then there's an excitement about being expressed, and there's a passion that underlies all the work that I could do. Like, maybe if I make this video, women who are in this situation with somebody who's a soulmate but not a life partner will have some better tools to navigate it and not flounder in it as long as I did along my journey. And so it meets some needs really well, and there's no part of me that's like, no, this really doesn't make sense, don't spend time this way. So that's just a really tiny example of, this kind of way of evaluating decisions sort of filtered through. So one of the things that I really want to recognize is how much your support system may not get it when you're in this place of, I'm so deeply connected in profound ways to this person, because people who love us often can see much more clearly the mismatches and say, this person is making you miserable. Maybe there's an extreme non-functioning thing like, yeah, but they're an addict, it's never going to go well. Or, you know, this person isn't a functional, responsible adult, they're just not going to be able to build a good relationship. And at the same, so someone who's your friend would perhaps advocate, are you crazy? Why are you still sticking around? Get out of there. And I get that. I get that it's coming from a loving place. It's not always particularly helpful, because what I found when I was in those kind of struggles is however many times anyone else said that to me, I'd said it 1,000 times to myself. And I was actually really mad at myself for not being able to be done until I was done. And so the first thing I would offer is just a lot of self-compassion and being gentle with yourself. And so in the times that I was in a relationship that wasn't feeding me and wasn't good for me, and wasn't meeting some really profound needs, with somebody that I loved very, very deeply and had some really amazing connections with when it worked. There's my kitty cat Astara. When I was in that place, I knew that I had to work harder to take care of myself, because it was such an energetic and emotional drain to be with this person. So there was a lot more shamanic hygiene, because messy, icky cords would happen between us that would drain my energy, that weren't very healthy, and I needed to eat healthy, and I needed to exercise more, and the maintenance of being okay was just took a lot more effort. And so what was nice about that is I couldn't take the action at that time. I wasn't ready to just leave the relationship. But what I could do was all these things to bolster my well-being, time with friends, you know, all the things that supported me, so that I could make up for the energy drain. And if I was going to be, you know, addictive about a connection, I could practice profound sobriety in other areas of my life, and it could be sustainable. Maybe not the most joyful, luminous expression, but at least sustainable. One of the things that I think is really hard, particularly for women, is Alison Armstrong describes our connection to our feelings as our connection to the eternal or the divine. And so as a woman, if you're running your feminine energy, so women are really adaptable, so we can run our masculine energy and our feminine energy, and anytime we're making huge generalizations about gender roles, everyone's mileage could totally vary. So this could be true of men, this could be, you know, true of whoever. This is my disclaimer, because it is a generalization. But there are these group of people who, if you drew a Venn diagram of, you know, those two intersecting circles, there's a lot of overlap between the people who are born into female bodies, who use their feelings as their compass and their connection to the eternal. And if you happen to reside in the intersection of those two circles, or you're just somebody who uses your feelings as a compass, then the place of needing to step away from someone you love is horrifically confusing, because it doesn't feel like the right thing. And it doesn't, and our compass just gets so turned upside down. And so whether you're leaving a job, whether you're leaving a relationship, whether you're leaving, you know, a situation that's not good for you, whether you're disconnecting from a beloved friend who, you know, has a tendency to be toxic, like anytime we're making a change where we authentically love the person or the situation or aspects of it, but it doesn't serve, that compass that usually serves us so well goes completely haywire. It's like magnets are all around if you think of a physical compass, and it can't orient. And it's really valuable to know that, because when we're making big decisions, a lot of times we rely on this certainty of it feeling like the right thing. And when we're stepping away from someone we love deeply, our emotions are going to be all over the map. And so that quiet surety that you can trust in making your decisions of, I feel in this deep quiet place, my body's aligned with this, my energy body's aligned with this, it feels on track for my soul purpose, which is a great place to decide from, isn't available just because there's so much background noise. Our emotions are bouncing all over the walls, and so one day we're like, screw this, I am leaving, I'm so over it, and the next day we're like, oh, it hurts, I don't want to do that, it doesn't feel right, and that's where we can do the rubber band thing where we leave and then we come back, and all of that. And it's just knowing that you need to find a different place to decide from that's not the emotions and frankly is not the mind. And the reason I say not the mind is the mind can act as the servant of the feelings. So think of a loving parent who's really authentically wanting their children to have something. When their child really, really, really wants something, if the parent's like, well, that wouldn't be harmful for them, and they're really, really wanting it, they'll try to find a way for them to have it. So I wanted to play the clarinet when I was, in band, and my parents, even though they didn't have a lot of money, figured out how to scrape the funds together so I could have a clarinet, which I played badly, from elementary school all the way through high school, because that was something that I wanted and I was drawn to, and even though it was a challenge, they figured out a way. They're like, well, this is important, we'll make this work. And the mind is like that. And so the trouble is that the mind really can't be trusted because it can be the servant of the feelings. It will make up the story to support the thing that you're telling yourself that you want. So I had a nice rerun of my mind's capacity to do this in this most recent relationship. So I met this amazing, beautiful soul of a man, just ridiculously intelligent, amazingly present in his energy body. I love the way he touches. He's super, super connected when he's with me, but his life is really chaotic, so even odds if we made a date, if he even got around to communicating with me enough to make a date, whether he'd show up. Really solid probability that even if it was 4 hours before and we said, okay, we'll get together, something would get blown up in that 4 hours and he wouldn't be there. And at the end of the day, it's just not kind for me to share something as intimate as my body plus my heart with someone who I don't know when I'm going to see him again, who doesn't communicate, who, disappears. And no matter how great it was when I was with him, the uncertainty and the confusion and I don't know what's going to happen next cost me too much when I was with him. And one of the upsides to have gone through a lot of different experiences is I have some really beautiful, amazing sexual experiences, and what I've learned is no matter how good the sex is, no matter if it goes on all night long and it fulfills every fantasy and a bunch that you never thought of and you're just in ecstasy and bliss, the clock will turn and that experience will come into completion. And if the pain and the misery of what happens after that is greater, it's very expensive. I don't like to buy pleasure with a greater amount of pain. And so here's the situation, going back to this. So here's my mind, and I'm evaluating. I'm like, okay, what I would say about myself is communication is one of my absolute most critical needs. If you can meet me in the throat chakra, we can work out a hell of a lot of other complicated stuff. I even have a man I'm dating who I have not spoken to in nearly 2 months, and that's fine because he's in the military, he doesn't have his phone, he has an amazing track record of when it's up to him, he's there. And as long as that's true, I knew he was going into the training, I knew I wouldn't hear from him. I don't know when I'll hear from him, and that's okay because there's this needs met of really, really good communication. And this other fellow, not at all. And usually when I see somebody who doesn't have good communication, I try to walk away sooner rather than later because I know this about myself. But we can always get tempted into these powerful exceptions where we're like, well, maybe I could work with this. This is such a compelling situation. And so I did. I gave it an honest try, and it could have gone either way. And so I want to kind of walk you through some of the stories my mind tells me in regards to, like, maybe this could work. So one of the great stories is, well, Katie, if you could just work on yourself and, not have attachment to when you're going to see someone and be much more zen about this, you could make it work. And I could, but I would lose so much energy fighting something that a lot of people would be willing to show up for. There are a lot of people who communicate in a way that really works for me. And so the overhead and the expense and how much I would have to struggle with the basic nature of who I am is really expensive and might not be successful. I have not had a lot of success with that in the past. And so for me, even though the mind says, well, couldn't you be more flexible? I'm like, not so likely. It's a good thought mind, but and I wish I could, and I tried it. Like, I truly gave it an honest try. Can I roll with this? And the truth was, I just was having like this disproportionate rage flash the last date that he canceled at the last minute, after the date that he forgot about entirely, and I was dressed and ready to go out the door, and there's no date, and it just slipped his mind, and I'd had enough of those experiences where I was like, I'm okay, I'm cool, it's all good, and then kabooey, here's the rage flash. And you have to be careful using that as a compass, because it's important to ask the question, am I in react to other people who I've had an issue with? And the truth was, yes. One of the things that came up with this was a cleaning out of some old unresolved feelings of other people I'd been in this place with where I wasn't getting needs met from somebody I really wanted it to work with. And that was useful. It's not my favorite flavor, but it was useful. So before I made a decision about this man, I went and did some clearing and releasing and being present and allowing and perspective to work through those old feelings so I could be really, in the moment. But the truth is, not so good for me. So next deal my mind came up with to make with myself is like, well, okay, it's not safe enough and it's not enough container to be romantically involved with somebody who is this unreliable. But maybe I could make him a friends with benefits. What if I make it really casual, and I see him when I see him, and then I could still hold on to having this beautiful soul in my life, and that would be really cool. And so I had a talk with myself about, okay, well, really, truly, what would that cost? And I could get some really good sex out of it. And I've had some really good sex. Like in the course of my journey, one of the happiest, most amazing things is I have had the opportunity to connect with some incredibly talented tantric men who really know some stuff. I feel a little embarrassed admitting in a video that's going to go on YouTube I've had great sex, but anybody who's made it this far into my rambling, it's I think it's okay. But the thing is, what I truly want, what I really, really want right now, and what I wanted at a different time was sexual experience. I had great sexual experience, but what I really want now is the deeper connection, the continuity, that these amazing sexual experiences be strung together in a way that like forms a necklace, that these jewels of experience, I always go to a bad pun or thing dirty joke when I say that, but I want the experiences to come together to create a continuity rather than standing alone and isolated. And the trouble with the thing is, I really wasn't just wanting sex from this man. I was wanting heart connection and making some kind of a deal or maneuvering where I keep what I can of him and try not to have that. Tends to be a huge energy leak. If you can do that, more power to you. If you want to explore that, great. But for me, it's an energy leak, and it takes up a disproportionate amount of space. So even though I might see him once a month casually, it's all cool. If I have that intensity of feeling for someone, the amount of energy I spend wrangling my heart not to attach takes up a lot of psychic and emotional space that could be held empty to invite someone into. And the other part of it is it's just really not about the sex. So if I could get to the point where I could just unconditionally enjoy this man exactly as he is, and if he shows up, great, and if he doesn't, oh well, that would be great, but I would have to detach my heart so much that really the what's in it for me factor wouldn't be there. So this was me going through this, and I kind of walked you through my mental process because some of what's true for me about how, you know, my sexuality and my heart are really connected, I think is true for a lot of people. And having this what kind of stories our head will make up, because basically it's just the part of us going, but I want this soul connection, I want this person. And the brain's like, okay, I'll figure it out. I will rationalize how this could work. And our brain will always rationalize. It's just what it does. It doesn't mean it maliciously. It's not trying to trick us. It's just answering to the emotions. And whatever is biggest on the emotional thing, it will come up with a rationalization of how something could work out. It's great to run it by your really rational friends, because, you know, they'll poke the necessary holes in it, like, yeah, no, really not. Here's what I know about you, and okay, you can do that, but, you know, you may have forgotten this really huge piece of, you know, all of your history about what's worked. And as a former engineer, I often find it useful to look at things in terms of statistical probability. And so having had a lot of deep conversations with this man about, you know, what I need and how he could show up, that's another, like, such a trap I spent so much time in. If I could just communicate clearly enough and be heard about what I need, and if they really understood what this meant to me, this person who cares about me would show up and provide it. And it's just not true. Like, the addict having the detailed idea of how it affects their loved ones when they drink, that might be the thing that tips them over in making a different choice. But a lot of addicts can be like, yep, I totally hear you, and I'm addicted. And it's a really hard place to be. So one of the you know, things that I can offer as a short pearl of wisdom is that one of the more painful stories and lies that we tell ourselves as people in my experience is, if this person loved me, they would do this thing or they would not do this thing. And that's just not true. People are more complicated, so people will do the thing that is meeting their addictive needs or numbing out feelings they can't deal with or desperately trying to whatever. There's so many reasons people do things, some healthy, some not healthy. And whether it's someone who has wounding that makes them a certain way, or whether it's somebody who just, that's their nature. You know, this guy is Native American. They're much more in the flow. I am a, you know, white woman immersed in, you know, a really structured societal environment. So you can make an appointment with me and I'm likely to show up for it. Very, very, very high probability and hit rate. And I honor the flow that is different, but it's not a flow that I can make compatible with my life for somebody who's that close to my heart. I just can't. And so I don't even think that this man is particularly wrong for how he's being. I think he's being really authentically true to himself. It's just a mismatch. So another thing to look at is the concept of the emotional bank account. And this is a Stephen Covey concept, and it basically, I think it's a really good place to evaluate the viability of a relationship. So when we get a bunch of needs met, the emotional bank account gets filled up. When we have, you know, things that hurt us or take away, the emotional bank account gets depleted. It's a way to get out of the right, wrong, good, bad analysis. I mean, I have spent so much time analyzing, you know, the men that I was involved with, and I've sat with women who were, you know, on the hamster wheel of just, you know, there's this and there's this, but then there's this about him and this is contradictory, and they're just trying to get the picture because they're like, if I could understand it, I know how to hack him and get the results I want. And I just haven't found that to be true. I think there's a lot to be said for understanding the other person, but taking out all of that mental kind of moving around, if you can't get your emotional bank account reliably filled up, So you're not staying in a positive balance where on a day-to-day basis what works for you, what makes your heart happy, your warm feelings are consistently in the plus column and instead are overdrawn a lot, whether it's because of your own wounding, whether it's because of a mismatch with the person, whether it's because, Mercury is retrograde, whether it's because of anything. If in a sustained experience with this person you cannot find a way to keep the emotional bank account balance, in the plus column, then it's really, really, really hard to have a relationship with anyone, work with a job, with a friend, whatever the situation is. And certainly, filling up your own emotional bank account and how you take care of yourself is super important. We don't want to be reliant on the people in our lives for that, but and there's always opportunity for new engagement. So one of the things I did before I came to the end with this person is I tried everything I could think of. I tried communicating through text, through calls, in person, via email. I tried asking him really deep questions about what I could do differently, like what would work for you to produce this result. The trouble was he wasn't a real reliable witness, so he'd tell me the thing and I'd do the thing, and it kind of sort of helped a little, but not all that much. And so after nearly 2 months of this being a major problem and not having something that my little engineering brain could confidently go, I believe if I do this thing that he has told me it will go differently this time, in the absence of that, that was where it was time to let go. So if you're in the place where your emotional bank account is depleted and there are new things you could try that have a probability of success, I think that's great. But if you don't have new things to try and you're perpetually in that depleted place, it's very hard to have a really joyful relationship, whatever the root cause, whatever the reason is behind it. And that was something that in the past, when I was in these really tumultuous relationships, I just didn't listen to. And this time I did. This time I had the, I think we should part ways. And I didn't want to, and we agreed to give it another try, and I felt really awful the next day. And the reason was that even though that really worked for my heart and it really worked for my, on a soul level, he's a beautiful soul, and oh, so great to dance with you, in my belly it just didn't work. Some really deep, profound parts of me were like, no, I don't want to get hurt this way again. And it wasn't, I'm all for, again, this is one of the complexities, there's no perfect rule. I'm all for being willing to say, yeah, I could get hurt in something. Guarding and protecting my heart doesn't make sense. And at the same time, being a good guardian of my heart, where I'm like, I'm not going to be careless with you. I'm not going to, just fling you into situations that have a high probability of going badly, and trust that I'll be able to work through. So, a lot of information here. I really hope that it's helpful. I know that it's super complicated, and I want to share that I'm just really today sitting with the heart hurt of knowing that I'm probably not going to get to play with this soul. Once I do the grieving and the release, who knows? Maybe there'll be something else that cycles around. But getting to be this deep with my heart with him is never going to happen. He's, okay, there's the ridiculously small probability that he could wildly change, but even holding on to that doesn't really let the energy fully move. It leaves these sneaky little cords and attachments. And my heart is really sad that this beautiful, amazing, vibrant man who's like no one I've ever met isn't going to be somebody that I dance with more in this lifetime. And there's a part of me that uses my feelings as a compass that's like, no, you solved the problem wrong, you wouldn't feel this way. And I'm saying to that part, I hear you, honey, and I love you. And I know it hurts, and I know, the heartbreak of a soul connection that doesn't line up is, I have no words. And it's part of why I think the Hollywood myth of setting up wildly different people who can't communicate with each other, who have the heroic, like, run to the airport and they're going to be together now, because of this passionate moment, sells so well. Like, we keep buying that story, because when I was in the place of saying, I'm coming to the end, I admit I really had this desperate, unrealistic fantasy that this man would suddenly, depart from all that had gone before and like heroically rescue us from needing to part ways. And of course he didn't. I've had the man heroically show up and rescue us, and unfortunately it never took. He meant it with every fiber of his being in the moment, but the underlying problems were ultimately still there. It's hard. It's really a deep loss. What I can say with great conviction is the story that we only have one soulmate is one of the worst lies, right up there with if he loved me he would or he wouldn't, is the story of, the one. And Alison Armstrong talks a lot about, like, please take this mythology and burn it and scatter the ashes to the winds. It is not a helpful mythology. One of my teachers says, if you're going to make some stuff up that feels good. His language was more colorful, but the one is not a mythology that makes you feel good unless you're in that delirious place where you're totally happy with the person, and then, the found the one mythology is kind of happy. But in general, it's I've had enough experience as a woman who's now 41 years old, who's had a lot of people that I've dated and had experiences with, and I can say they're not thick on the ground, but there are a lot of souls that are amazing, that I've had this really, really deep connection with. And one of the things that I was using my mind to talk through is going through past times when I had someone who I really, really had a profound connection with. And so if you can hit the soul connection, like my soul likes you, there's this love, there's this vibrational compatibility, and the sacral chakra, we hook up sexually and you can hold my heart. Oh, wow, I am so compelled by that. And the trouble is, I've dated a lot of men who couldn't receive me in the throat chakra, couldn't communicate with, and couldn't receive me in terms of my boundaries, like what worked and what didn't wasn't something that was available. And there were a lot of reasons, about relationships not working, but I was reminding myself of other moments when I've been through this, because one of the lies emotions tell us is, if you feel this way now, you'll feel this way forever. And it's not true, that we go through the grief process, and if we go through the grief process, we come into this grace and acceptance. And I've had men that, I was so connected to, who just weren't available to show up, who stepped away from the connection, who, or I stepped away from the connection. And it's okay. Like, I remember them, I remember the experience, but it's neutral now. It's okay. And this will be too, but I wanted to share this while I'm in that place where my heart's like, no, this can't be the right choice. I won't get to play with this beautiful soul. I want to play with this beautiful soul. Come on, figure out a way to make it work. And it's like the kid, begging for the ice cream, or the, staying longer at Disneyland, and I'm needing to be the grown-up saying, I know you think that would make you happy, but honey, it really won't. It's better to make space for the person who, who works. And at the same time, being poly, I got to have an experience last night with this beautiful man who's, deeply trained in Tantra, professional massage practitioner, who has decided to court me by just gifting me with hours of body work in a really heart-connected way, who adores my body exactly as it is, who's, like stunningly, put him on a wall in a poster, kind of beautiful, like every muscle. I love a lot of different male body types, so I feel funny like talking about this, but he's just, I just, watch him go get a drink and I'm like, you're so pretty. And he's communicating with me exquisitely. He texts me every day. He stays in connection, and it's easy. It's really, really, really easy. And so my emotional bank account, as I engage with him, is getting more and more and more filled up. And it doesn't mean that he's, the perfect connection. He's very poly, and so there are other people he's connecting with as well, and I don't see him being a primary partner. But I'm having this connection that there are all of these yeses and all these places that I'm being met in ways that really work for me, that are super high needs met, and it's really easeful, and it's really a joy. And this other connection was fill up the emotional bank account, drain it, fill it up, drain it. And I've been on that cycle a fair bit in my life, arguing with, but I love this part of the person and this part doesn't work for me and I don't want to give this up, and that process is depleting and painful. And so I hope that this great long rambling is helpful and supportive and gives people who are in this place of needing to step away from someone who is an amazing soulmate and a terrible partner for them. I'm not saying they're a terrible person, but terribly misaligned for them. That it gives you more help and support in navigating that confusing space, because when our emotions get all tumultuous, it's so hard to see the clarity, to see the path forward. So I hope it really supports you. If you need more facilitation, obviously I have a lot to say on this subject, and there's some really powerful energetic interventions that can help cut cords and ties so that you can come home to yourself if you needed to leave somebody who you had a profound soul connection with but didn't work out, or they left you. I've certainly had the other side of it where I just wasn't chosen. I was like, wow, this is so valuable. I'll really put my heart and soul into this connection, and that just wasn't what was alive for the other person. They didn't place the same value. And so for me, I really have to watch my bias as a person who's very connected to shamanism and the soul realm and all of that, that I don't end up weighting the spirit too heavily, so that I ignore, some pretty big, like, wow, you're not that functional as a person, warning flags. So again, my name is Katie Weatherup. You can find more about my work at handsoverheart.com, and I hope that this video is helpful and supportive.